Hello boys and girls. Today our video is going to be about multiplication using the standard algorithm. So we're going to be talking about what is the standard algorithm and how to use it. We're going to be starting out by only doing 2 digits multiplied by 1 digit and actually a little bit of 3 digits multiplied by 1 digit. But later on we will progress into doing more than just 1 digit. So first of all, let's start out by figuring out what is the standard algorithm. So I have a problem here, 35 times 4. And I think last year in 4th grade, you learned how to multiply these numbers using a number of different strategies. So you could have used partial product, which meant that you could take this 35 and change it into a 30 times 4 and a 5 times 4. That definitely could have been a good strategy for you to use. Sometimes if you had 2 digit times 2 digit, you would use the box method where you would again do partial products and break up those numbers into a box. Now, standard algorithm is not really anything different and it's not anything new. It's just taking all of those old strategies and making a new one. So this is another strategy that we use to solve multiplication problems. You'll find that once you get comfortable and you start using standard algorithm more often, it is actually more efficient. And efficient means that you can do it better and you get a more accurate answer most of the time. And it is actually quicker. So what we want you to be able to do by the end of 5th grade is to not use these strategies anymore, but to be using the standard algorithm for when you multiply. That way you can become more efficient and you can become quicker at multiplying. Your parents might also refer to this as the old way of multiplying, or this is the way that they learned when they were back in school. So they didn't learn all those fancy strategies that you learned in 4th grade last year. They only learned how to do the standard algorithm. So that's really good because then your parents can show you maybe and practice at home with you. Alright, so before we get started, I just want to go over a couple of vocabulary words that I'm going to be saying throughout this video. So if you don't know what any of these words mean, it would be important for you to kind of just write it down and take note of it, okay? So first of all, we have factor and product. So it's really important for you to know these two words and to know how they work in a multiplication problem. So let's take the problem 3 times 2 equals 6. So the factors in this problem are the two numbers that are being multiplied together. So that would be the 3 and the 2. Okay, so we usually do factor. Factor gives us a product, and the product is the number or the answer to the end of the problem. So the factors are the two numbers being multiplied together. The product is the answer. Okay, so then we're moving on to ones place, tens place, and hundreds place. So we just spent all last week kind of talking about place value, and we went over place value chart, and we talked about 10 times as much and 1/10 of. So these three terms should be pretty fresh in your head right now. The ones place we know is kind of like our base starting point, and then the next place value after the ones place is the tens place. So we know that 10 ones will give us 110, and then tens to hundreds. Regrouping is probably a word that you're familiar with. Now, we often think of regrouping or renaming in addition. Sometimes you call it carrying, if you're carrying a number up. We're going to try to really use regrouping when we're talking about multiplication so that we know that we're using really accurate vocabulary. So regrouping just means if I take a bundle of ones or a bundle of tens or a bundle of hundreds and I have enough to bring them to the next place value, I'm going to bring them up and write them above the number. So let me show you an example with an addition problem. So if I have 17 plus 6, okay, so I know that I would start in the ones place here. So 6 plus 7 is 13. So I have 3 ones down here, but I have a group of tens that I can't keep in the ones place. So I'm going to regroup, bring that group of tens up here, and write a 1. So I know that when I add up all my tens, my 1 plus this one over here would give me 2. I'm regrouping that bundle of 1s. The same thing applies in multiplication, so you're going to see in just a minute when we start working with numbers that we will also be regrouping with the standard algorithm. And then lastly, we have estimating and reasonable answer down here at the bottom. So when we are first working with the standard algorithm, what we're going to do is kind of estimate our answers after we're done using the standard algorithm. And the reason for that is so that we can see if our answer is reasonable. What I mean by reasonable is that if we multiply these numbers together and we estimate the numbers so that we have nice clean numbers that we can multiply very easily, and the number that we get with the standard algorithm is way off from the number that we get when we estimated, we know that that's not reasonable and we know that we made a mistake somewhere. So estimating is a really good tool to kind of check your work and to see if the answer that you got was reasonable or that it made sense. Alright, so let's start out. You can see that we have the pencil down in the bottom corner. That means that I want you to be following along with me while I do this with you. So this is probably going to be the first time that you've ever multiplied with the standard algorithm. So it's going to be really important that you pay attention, okay? And write down every step. So first of all, I have my expression here, 45 times 6. So when I'm doing the standard algorithm, it's really important that I write the numbers vertically, and vertically means up and down. So you can see right now that the numbers are written side to side or horizontally. It's going to be really hard for me to do the standard algorithm when it's written like this. So I'm going to rewrite this problem vertically, and I'm going to make sure that I line up the place values. If my place values are not lined up, so if I had maybe the 6 underneath where the 4 was, that would mess me up totally and completely, and I would get a totally wrong answer. So it's really important that you line up the place values. Please write that in your notes because that will be so, so important to you later on. Alright, so with the standard algorithm, what I do is I always start in the ones place. So in the ones place on the bottom right here, I have a 6. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take that 6 and I'm going to multiply it by every place value that's in the number. Okay, so in this number 45, I only have a tens place, and a ones place. So what I'm going to do first is I'm going to start out by multiplying 6 times 5, because a ones place times a ones place is where we start. So 6 times 5 is 30. And so remember, just like we do addition, when we have a group of tens that we can't put in the ones place, we need to regroup. So I'm going to bring my 3 up here to the top over in the tens place because it's not really a 3, it's a 30. And then I'm going to move to my tens place. So first I did this, 6 times 5. Now I'm going to take that 6 and multiply it times this 4. Now, it's really important that you see that this is not just a 4, but the 4 is in the tens place, it is a 4D. Okay, so that's why it's going to be really important that we put that number right underneath the tens place. We line it up so that we make sure that we're keeping our place values correct. So now I'm going to take that 6 times 4, which is 24, and then make sure that I add that extra 3 tens up here that I regrouped. So 6 times 4 is 24, plus 3 more is 27. And I'm going to make sure I line up my place values. So the 7 goes under the tens place, and the 2 goes under the hundredths place, even though we don't have any. Sometimes what I encourage students to do, if you're having a hard time lining up your place values, maybe you need to work on your handwriting and sometimes your numbers get all squished together, what I suggest is that you take your pencil and you just draw lines to separate the place values. So I know, okay, these are all the ones, these are all the tens, and these are all the hundreds. Our final step, which this is definitely optional, but I suggest that you do this when we first start out because it helps you to see if your answer is accurate, is to estimate. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my original expression here. I'm going to estimate this so that I can see if my answer was close or reasonable. So I'm going to take 45 and I'm going to round that to 50. Okay, so we know that 45, it's in between 40 and 50, whatever way you round it. Now, technically, the way that you're supposed to round it, it would go to 50, but if we're looking for reasonableness, you could either go to 40 or 50. So I'm going to multiply 50 times 6. Okay, so I know that 5 times 6 is 30, so I know 50 times 6 is 300. This would have been really easy for you to figure out if you remembered your lesson from last week on 10 times as much and 1/10 of. Okay, so if I look to see here, 300, and my actual answer was 270. So I asked myself, okay, is this a reasonable number, or is this number close to the number that I estimated? I would say, yeah, it's only 30 off, which makes sense because we rounded these numbers up to a higher number. And it tells me that I'm pretty close to this number. Now, if my number had been 3,000 and the real number that I actually got when I solved it was 270, then I would be a little concerned because I would know that I messed up somewhere when I multiplied. But I think 300 and 270 are pretty close, so I would say that we did a really good job and our answer is reasonable. All right, let's do another one together. So you're doing this one with me. You'll notice that this one is 3 digits, but we're going to have the same exact procedure with this one. So remember, I need to write it vertically, up and down, and I line up all my place values. 387 times 5. Okay, that's my first step. I'm actually going to go ahead and I'm going to draw those lines to separate the place values because this one can get a little bit confusing because it's 3 digits on the top. It's a 100 place number. All right, so starting out with my ones here, my number 5 is where I start. This is my base. I'm going to take this number and multiply it by each of the place values in this number, but I'm going to start with the ones. So 7 times 5 is 35. I have 5 ones and 3 tens. I don't know if it's going to show up in this black background. A little bit. So I regroup that 3 up there. All right, so then I'll take my next number, 8 times 5, which is 40. And then I have to add that extra 3 on, which is 43. So I'm going to put my 3 down here and my 4 up here, just like if I was adding. Now I'm going to go all the way over to that last place value, to the hundreds place. Okay, and I'll do 5 times 3, which is 15. And then I can't forget that extra 4 up here to add. So 5 times 3 is 15, plus 4 is 17. Okay, now you'll notice that this product gives us a number in the thousands place. So that's why I said it was really important that we make sure that we line up our place values, because if not, we would have gotten kind of confused with all these numbers in here if you try to squeeze them all together. So our answer becomes 1,735. Now, just like the last one, we're going to estimate this number so that we can see if we get a reasonable answer for what we got. So I'm going to take our original equation here. I'm going to estimate 387. I'm just going to estimate it to the nearest hundreds place because I think that's going to give me the easiest number to multiply. So 387, I'm going to estimate to 400 because it's greater than 350, which means I'm going to round up. I'm going to get about 400. So if I multiply 400 times 5, I know that 4 times 5 is 20, so 400 times 5 is 2,000. So just like the last one we talked about, is my estimated answer close to my actual answer? So if my actual answer was 1,735 and my estimated answer is 2,000, that's pretty close. It's not that far off. It's not a crazy huge gap in between those two numbers. And if I was going to round 1,735 up, I would round it probably to 2,000. So I would say that those are pretty close together, and I would say that 2,000 is a reasonable estimate for the answer that we actually got. Okay, so great job. All right, so I have one here for you to do on your own. So 58 times 2, go ahead and write that horizontally, 58 times 2, and make sure you line your place values up. You can even separate the place values if you'd like. Actually, I would suggest it. And at this point, I want you to pause the video, solve this problem on your own, and then I'd also like you to estimate to see if you can get a reasonable answer. And then when you're finished with all of that, I'd like you to replay the video, watch me solve it, and check your work to see if you got it correct. All right, I'll see you in a few. All right, so hopefully you have solved it on your own. You're playing the video now because you're checking your work. So let's solve this problem together. All right, so I'm going to take my pen here, and I'm going to start here with my 2. That's always where I start, and I always do 1s times 1s. Doesn't matter how many numbers I have in the top number. I'm always going to start with the 1s. So 8 times 2 is 16. I'm going to regroup the 1. Remember, we're not carrying. We are regrouping. And then I'm going to do my 2 multiplied by my tens place, which is a 5. So 2 times 5 is 10. And then I'm going to add that 1 more that's up there, that extra 10 that I regrouped. So 2 times 5 is 10, plus 1 more is 11. And I'm making sure that I am separating those place values. Now if I estimate my answer, I'm going to round 58 to 60. And 60 times 2 will give me an answer of 120. So then I asked myself, is my estimated number fairly close to my actual answer? And 116 is very close to 120. So I would say that that is reasonable. How did you do? Hopefully you did awesome. All right, this is going to be the last one for today. So again, I want you to do the same thing. Solve it on your own. Estimate to see if your answer was reasonable. And when you're ready to check back in, replay the video and watch how I solve it. All right, welcome back. Hopefully you didn't have too hard of a problem with that one. As you can tell that this number is 3 digits. So the same thing applies, just a little extra to do. So first of all, let's rewrite our problem vertically. So 247 times 4. I'm going to separate my place values just to keep me straight. Okay. So starting with my 1s here, I'm going to do 4 times 7. 4 times 7 is 28, and I'm going to regroup the 2. Now I'm going to do 4 times 4, which is 16, and add those 2 extras up there. So 16 plus 2 is 18. Regroup that 100 up there. Then 2 times 4, I'm taking this 4 over here, multiplying it by the hundreds place up here. 2 times 4 is 8, plus 1 more is 9. So we didn't quite get into the thousands place. We got 988. Now let's estimate to see if our answer was reasonable. So 247, I'm going to round that number down to 200. Now the reason that I rounded it down instead of rounding it up, I figured, okay, it's less than 250. 250 is a halfway point. If it was above 250, I would probably round it up to 300. But because it's less than that, I'm going to round it down. So 200 times 4. Now I know 4 times 2 is 8. So 200 times 4 is 800. So I'm adding 2 extra place values on there. And then I asked myself, is 800 pretty reasonable to say that we're close to 988? Well, I think it's about close. It's not a couple hundred off. It's pretty close to it, so I'm going to say that that is reasonable, and my answer is 988. All right, my friends, it is now time for your quiz. So go ahead, hop on to Canvas, take your time with the quiz, even though it's only 3 questions. Take your time. This is a new skill. If you need to rewatch this video for a little bit more practice, you are more than welcome to. And good luck.